This is a Celebration 125 podcast.
Logging trucks were a lot smaller than they are now, too. It was all, everything was smaller, it seemed. It was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot more guys worked there in logging, like there's no end of guys, it seemed. And then when Dad worked for Blondie Rustad too, and we'd go up there on weekends when they were working, and then the cookhouse was, the grub was unreal. I never ate like that, but everything, they're all good to kids, and you could ride in the logging trucks, and it was a whole different world than down here.
Yeah. When you say that the grub was unreal, you mean that in a positive way, right?
Oh, yes, by all means. I never saw the amount of food I guess if you keep guys fat and that, they're good. But if they were to be starving, you wouldn't get nothing out of them. But it was always, I don't think I hit two camps that had bad grub.
Yeah.
It was always like really good and overkill, really. It's a lot of waste from some guys. Well, I shouldn't say it, but I worked with one old Swede faller, and he'd bring the camp we were at then. The sandwiches were made for you. All you had to do is pick them up. And a ham sandwich where there'd be really nice sliced ham, and he would take the center out of it and then chuck the rest with the whiskey jacks. They were like a bird that was always around then. I always thought, I can't believe, like it was just unreal, like for the conditions you had.
Bunk I'm just curious, 20 Mile Bay off of Harrison Lake, would that be the furthest north that you had worked?
No. Port Douglas was the first, like in Spring Creek is right at the end of the lake.
Yes.
There, or the head of the lake. And then I worked for Catamount-Toohey, but later on they had already moved down to Silver River after Larson went broke. I spent most of my time in the woods at Larson's. That's at Silver River. That's across the lake from 20 Mile. And I never got back to 20 Mile until we were contracting. Like we had quit logging, but we ended up back maintaining roads and culverts and that. And I worked quite a bit at 20 Mile. That was in the 80s and 90s. And then Silver River was probably the most, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I am here. Larson Logging was Beach's old camp, and Beach was an old band that had a shingle mill on Harrison Bay. And in Harrison Mills, across from the old Kilby store, was that Rat Portage Mill. It long gone, but if you cross the railway bridge going towards Lake Errock, there was a big shingle mill there, and that was owned by Beach, and he had timber at Silver River.
Yes, some of the foundation of the Rat Portage is still standing.
Oh yeah, that's the same mill. And if you're ever down there, from the old beach camp, when you cross the Harrison River and go into that beach, if you look straight across, you can see where Beach's shingle mill was there too. It's pretty well burnt now, but you can see where it was. But why they were there, the rail, like CPR was right there, so for shipping the shingles and that was perfect. After Beach left, Henry A. Larson he came up from Bellingham, like Puget Sound and whatnot. He logged down there, but his partner, a guy by the name of Rick Raleigh, he was a good logger, and there was about 7 guys came up from Burlington, like came from their old horse loggers, but a lot of them, Roe Nash, he was, they were good loggers, them guys down there. They were real good. And Larson had bought out Beach's timber, and then he really didn't spend that much time there because Rick Raleigh, his partner, he ran it, and he was really a good guy. And I ended up working there, quite a while. But there's some more in between there. We're still living up Seabird. The one day I was out in the slough in the canoe, and the canoe, it's quite quiet. We were fishing, and I could hear it sounded like a yarder, and then whistle and listening, and so I paddled down the Cunningham Ranch, and here I could hear it. So I thought, so I had a Model A Ford I'd bought from my brother. So I went home and jumped in it and went in the old road. It used to be a plank road when Indian hardwood took the hardwood out of there, and then some of it had been taken out, and then somebody had put some of the road in with a cap. So anyway, I went in there, and here's a 1010 Lawrence and a tree standing with a few logs around it. Bit of complaining going, the motor had gone out of it. And 1010 Lawrence is a T120 Chrysler engine on the 6-cylinder. They were just taking that one out. I was poking my nose in there, and then the guy, Ben Nickel by name, he's the owner and that, and he said, what are you doing? I said, just wandering around. And I was 14 then. It was summertime, and I said, you're not looking for a job, are you? And yeah, what can you do? And I said, well, not very much, but, so he said, well, give us a hand if you can. He's got a new motor coming tomorrow, and then it worked out pretty good because when he brought the rebuilt, it came from Big Motors. They all had a sticker on the top of them, and it was kind of a tight squeeze putting the fluid coupling onto the crank. It was, you almost need small hands, and you needed a long 9/16 wrench. There were fine thread 3/8 nuts, and I could get my fingers in there. So it worked good. I was a hero then. So anyway, we got the motor in there and got her running. And then he said, well, you come tomorrow and you can punk whistles and chase. And I was right in heavens. I was there bright and early. And Ben, they didn't break the engine in or nothing. They fired her up. And the guy by the name of Jake Lang, he was flying chokerman, they called him. He was the only guy out in the brush. Like he set chokers, changed roads, did everything. And then Ben run the yarder, and we were cold decking. That's where you rig a tree, and then like that's a spar tree, and it was a standing tree, which already was there. So Ben had limbed it and topped it, and then hung the guy line, 6 guy lines on it. And then what they did, it's quite swampy ground back in there, and instead of building a road, they yard it to a bar tree like a coal deck. And then what Ben was going to do, he was going to swing it once more, you call it, where he rigged another tree just at the end of the road where it was a better road. You could get a truck in there.
Right.
And then he going to swing that coal deck out. Well, anyway, he said, now you get out to the end of the wire there and keep out of the bite, and keeping out of the bite is keeping away from the line. Ben was really good. He showed me, he took a choker in the landing there where he was, and he bent it, and he said, "You see that, Bunk? See, it's nice and flexible and that, yeah." But he said, when that's tight, that's like a steel rod. So the main line was 3/4 inch. So he said, that's like getting hit with a steel 3/4 inch steel rod. So don't get in the bite. So, and keep your eyes open, and you listen to the Jake's signals. So anyway, he didn't have a bug. I had seen a bug at 20 mile. A bug is a little switch that you put on the end of whistle wire, and it's a block of wood. Well, in fact, two together, and you make contact, and that's where you blow the signal from. And I hope I don't confuse people. The yarding engineer can't see the guys in the brush, so the only way he knows what they want, rigging slinger or the hooker, a holler to the punk, the whistle punk, and then go ahead. It used to be one, blow it once and that go ahead, but stop was 1, 2, and then haul back was 2 and a bunch of shorts and whatnot. Anyway, everybody knew the signals, so we go back there, and I followed the wires. Ben had already strung the wire, and it wasn't really whistle wire, because I used to see whistle wire on Dad's lunch kit, where he threw it over his shoulder, and it's 2 wires, but it's wrapped in a black rubber. It's probably 3/8 of an inch, and you can pull it. It's pretty good wire, but he had some house wire there, brown wire. Anyway, it didn't matter. She was good. But I didn't have a bug, so I had to touch the wires together, to make contact. And how that worked, that went right into a little relay switch and onto electric horn. So as I touched the wires together, it made contact and beeped at the yarder. So anyway, Jake, he was real good. He'd holler, and then when they were yarding Ben was yarding the turn in, I had the light out running for the pile, because I had, I was called what you call a chaser to unhook the turn. Mm-hmm. And then Ben would land the turn on the coal deck pile, and he was quite fussy laying it in there. Even though he couldn't see, he'd still lay it in there so to build a base for the pile. And then I'd run in, and Ben had worked for Blodell, Stewart, and Welch, which was pretty hard on men, but they were fairly highball outfit. And Ben would just say, click, 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 click. That meant to hurry up and unhook it, clink there was a knob on the choker, one on each end, and what they call a bell. And the bell slid along the choker, but to hook it together, it was almost looked like a key slot. There was a circle where the knob went in, and then it came down. That's what it was. And what you had to do was yank a bit of slack and flip the bell off. And then 14, I don't think you're quite as strong as you should be. But anyway, and then I'd run like crazy back once I gave Ben the signal, to skin her back. And I'd run for the end of the wire so I could stop it where Jake wanted it stopped, and then slack it down, or whatever Jake needed, we would send it in signals. And I thought this really, I was in heaven anyway. So anyway, we built that coal deck pile and yarded the whole setting, well, half the setting. Ben left that spar tree there, it wouldn't come down anyway because the pile held it. And then he was a rigger, so he stripped the guy lines off it and yanked them down the road. And he had a couple of logging trucks. One was an old Federal, and then there was another GM Army truck, and then 6x6. And then so he yanked the guy lines down to the next setting where he was going to swing that coal deck pile. Then when we're taking that tree down, he said, now remember, Bunk, don't ever, they're spiked to a stump, like you notch a stump and spike it and put 3 wraps on it. But he said, always throw the bite over the stump like that. He really meant that because he said if you cut her loose and the tree falls, the snotty end, like the eye with the splice, is liable to catch you and, well, drag you, it'd kill you. So always remember that, to throw the bite, and that's like, how would I explain the bite? Well, it's, you take the line and throw it over the stump and then pull the end down so it stayed over there as you used a spike bar, which is a horrible, horrible thing. It's heavy and it's awkward, but they use railroad spikes to spike the line to the stump like use. So anyway, when you bounce and get that spike out, then you could see when you get down to the last wrap, the guy line would move because it was tight, and then the weight of the line, it would pull and basically run towards the pile. And right away you could see what would happen, like if you didn't have that bite thrown over, if you got caught in the eye, you'd go for a ride. So,
oh, boy.
anyway, we moved down and Ben topped the tree, and Jake and me were cutting saplings just around the tree, just where the pile was going to be. And then he hung a pass line block up on the tree, and then brought he used a straw line, and then he pulled the guy lines up and then spiked them up there and then choked the tree, and then the other end he strung them all and then came back down, and then take the straw line and a Tommy Moore block. That's I guess you could call it a pulley, but they call it a block in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And then pack it out to the stumps he tell you to. He, from up on the tree, he could see what stumps he wanted. And then with the axe, and he didn't have a power saw then, it was just axe usually.
Wow.
And then with a 8-pound sledgehammer, and I have packed that on the spikes, and they're heavy too. They're rotten, rusty things. Hung a Tommy Moore block on the stump, and then choked the guy line with, and leave a good end on it, meaning you have enough slack to go around the stump. And then he tightens up just with a straw line, and then where it was notched and the flat spot, that's where you spike the first wrap, and then you put the 2 on the outside and the 1 in the center. Like a railroad spike has, like they're off center, so that grabbed the line and squeezed it to the stump, and then went around again through another wrap on the stump and give her a little snort with a straw line, and then spike it. And then he always put 3 wraps on, which was good. And then go to the next one, and then packing the block to the back end where he was going to start yarding. But with that one swinging the pile, he used the tail hold for the spar tree, like the coal deck tree.
Yeah.
And then that way he had lots of lift, so he had choked a stump out behind the coal deck pile, and then hung a block on, well, it was already up there, threaded the straw line through there, and pulled the main line and, well, the haul back through, and then shackled it onto the butt rigging, and then it went from the back spar, you'd call it, which was right above the coal deck pile, and then the butt rigging, then, well, you always have to watch the shackles or don't come loose, because what you got then, you got the haul back running from the yarder and out through the block up on the tree, like the spar tree, and then back to that back spar, and then comes around, and then onto that they hook the butt rigging, it's called, and it's got a couple of swivels on it, and then that's where the chokers, where the bowl hooks of the chokers hang on it, and then the main line is hooked to the other end, and all the stuff you got to watch, you don't pinch your fingers, so that's about all I can say. Well, when you're swinging the pile,
yeah,
it's really good because it's really easy to get a big turn, there's lots of logs you can choke, a lot more than the yarder can pull sometimes. But then he swung it down to the home tree, you'd call it, and then when that was all done, he yarded it all there, and instead of hauling right at the time, he didn't have guys working, we used he had a triple drum 30 cat with had what you call a triple drum on it. It was like a little yarder only on the back of a cat, and he had it on a gin pole, and that's what we loaded with, but he swung the pile first, which instead of doing it all in the one shot where a bigger outfit would have, just with a short crew we had, that's what we did there. And then he went through Mariah Slough. You couldn't go over the bridge, the trucks were too heavy, and he dumped down on Cuthbert Road, just below their bridge, and why he did that's right out to the Fraser then, so he boomed right below Cuthbert Bridge, and then they took the booms from there, and by that time, school was going back in, and it was really hard leaving there and going back to school, but anyway, that's how it goes. Well, I only made it about half a year in school, and I figured, well, the principal told me I was wasting their time, and I said, well, I figure I'm wasting my time and your time, so we pulled the pin there, and I went to work and ended up working I went to Canfor, padding on the shovel, and then they shut down, and then I think we went for Watkins, and we hit quite a few outfits, but we kept working. As one would shut down, we'd go to another one, and then I went to Houdon's. They were logging right where the fish hatchery is at Morris Valley now. That was Houdon's camp. We went there setting chokers with Cliff Point and Nobby Point, and Johnny Paul was pulling rigging. Frank Gilardi was push, that's Phil's brother. It was pretty good there. We setting chokers first, and then the hooker, old Fred Naslin, that was hooking on the coal decker. They had coal deckers because it saved building road. What it was, the home tree was where a track side, it's called. So that's where they yarded the wood and loaded it out right there. But instead of building road, a coal decker was a yarder, but they would move it overland, and probably 400 or 500 feet out, and it would yard these coal deck piles. Well, then the track side would swing them, they call it swinging them, down to the home tree and then load it out. Well, Houdon had, and it was a 11-12 Lawrence, a little bigger than a 10-10. When we were working on the track side, this kid come along, and he was just a muttering. He'd got run off from this rotten old hooker. So anyway, Gallardi said, "Do you want to go there tomorrow?" So anyway, everybody said, "Boy, yeah, watch that guy." So he's a horrible old guy. So anyway, I go down there on this old, and hard hats were out. All the loggers I knew wore hard hats, but he had a fedora hat on, and I would say he would probably be in his 50s, and he had quite a hoarse voice. And he said, "Oh, you're the new punk, are you?" Well, he said, "I went through 11 punks in 13 days, so you'll be the 12th." And I thought, "Well, you are miserable." Anyway, I thought, well, we'll try it. So we did, and the rigging slinger there was Norm Harris, who I got to know real good, and I got to know his son real good, he's a logger. And Norm was pulling rigging, and he said, "Bunk, don't listen to him. His bark's a lot worse than his bites." And I thought, well, I don't know, he's sure. But he was just a gruff old character, and he wouldn't wear a hard hat and whatnot. And he swore like crazy and yelling at everybody. And I knew the yarding engineer was Mo Barnes. He was a pretty good guy. And he said, you make one boo-boo on the whistles and you're out of here. And I thought, yeah, I'll see. So anyway, he was always yelling at me or something. But then one day it was raining, a rotten cold day, and he come and lit a fire by me. He said, "I thought I'd keep you warm." And I kind of thought, well, it's picking up around here, but no, it wasn't long, and he was back. It was just his way, and I was really petrified. I was scared to death of him, because he was always going to boot my rear end and whatnot.